The 19th century was an age of transformation, a century when Europe reinvented itself through fire and ambition. Empires rose and fell, revolutions shook kingdoms, and power often found itself concentrated in the hands of men who believed they were destined to shape history. They called themselves saviors of their nations. History remembers them as dictators. Napoleon III was born in exile, yet dreamed of an empire. In 1808, in the quiet town of Ajaccio, Corsica, Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the nephew of the legendary Napoleon I, came into the world under the shadow of a famous name. From childhood, he lived not as an ordinary boy, but as a symbol. The Bonaparte name was both a blessing and a curse. Europe remembered his uncle as both a genius and a tyrant, and the young Louis Napoleon grew up believing he was destined to restore that lost glory. As a young man, he tried twice to seize power in France through coup attempts. Both failed miserably. He was captured, imprisoned, and ridiculed. But even behind the stone walls of the fortress of Ham, he never stopped believing in his destiny. There, in isolation, he studied politics, economics, and social reform. He wrote The Extinction of Pauperism, a book that painted him not as a general or a nobleman, but as a social reformer, a man of the people. Then came 1848, a year that changed everything. Revolution swept across Europe, and the French monarchy fell. In the newly formed Second Republic, Louis Napoleon ran for president. His name alone was magic. To the poor, he was a savior. To conservatives, a guarantee of order. He won by a landslide. But he wasn't satisfied with a 4-year term. In December 1851, exactly 47 years after his uncle crowned himself emperor, Louis Napoleon staged a coup d'etat. He dissolved Parliament, arrested his opponents, and declared himself Emperor Napoleon III. The people, weary of instability, approved it through a national referendum. Thus began the Second French Empire, an era of grandeur, modernization, and hidden decay. Under Napoleon III, France changed beyond recognition. He hired the visionary Baron Haussmann to rebuild Paris. Narrow medieval streets gave way to wide boulevards, parks, and elegant avenues. It wasn't just beautification. It was control. Broad streets meant fewer barricades, fewer revolts. Economically, France thrived. New banks emerged, industry expanded, and the railways connected the nation like never before. Napoleon III saw himself as a modern emperor, a man who could marry monarchy with progress. But his foreign adventures told another story. He fought in the Crimean War to contain Russia's power, joined the Italian campaign to help unite Italy against Austria, and even sent troops to Mexico in a disastrous attempt to create a French-backed monarchy there. That gamble ended with the death of Emperor Maximilian and the humiliation of France. Still, Napoleon believed he could control Europe's balance of power. He underestimated one man, Otto von Bismarck. When Bismarck manipulated diplomatic tensions between Prussia and France over the Spanish throne, Napoleon took the bait. The infamous Ems dispatch, altered by Bismarck, made it seem as though the Prussian king had insulted France. Paris demanded war. In July 1870, the Franco-Prussian War began. Within weeks, the French army was crushed at Sedan. Napoleon III was captured, his empire collapsed, and the Republic was restored. He spent his final years in exile in England, sick, broken, and forgotten. While Napoleon III's empire glittered in the West, a far colder and more calculating force was rising in the North. A man who believed in order, discipline, and destiny, not democracy. His name was Otto von Bismarck, and he would become known to history as the Iron Chancellor. Bismarck was born in 1815 into a proud Prussian aristocratic family, a Junker as they were called. He grew up on a vast estate surrounded by military men and strict Lutheran values. He was brilliant, arrogant, and deeply conservative. In his youth, he studied law, but found politics far more intoxicating than courtrooms. By his 30s, he entered the Prussian parliament, quickly earning a reputation as a fierce defender of monarchy and a sharp-tongued debater. He despised liberalism and revolution, calling them the fever dreams of the naive. To Bismarck, the world was a chessboard, and he intended to be the one moving the pieces. In 1862, King Wilhelm I of Prussia faced a crisis. The parliament refused to approve his military budget. The army was in turmoil. The king, on the verge of abdication, turned to one man he believed could save him: Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck accepted the post of prime minister, and within days gave his most famous speech. The great questions of the day will not be decided by speeches and majority votes, but by iron and blood. That phrase, iron and blood, became his creed. He believed that Germany's destiny was unity, but unity could only come through war. Over the next decade, Bismarck launched 3 masterful wars, each calculated to bring the German states under Prussian dominance. First, in 1864, he allied with Austria to defeat Denmark and claim the provinces of Schleswig and Holstein. It was a small, quick war, but it gave Prussia a taste of victory and Bismarck control of key territories. Next, in 1866, he turned on his former ally, Austria. It was a bold and dangerous move, but Bismarck never played safe. The Austro-Prussian War lasted only 7 weeks. At the decisive Battle of Königgrätz, Prussia crushed the Austrian army. The old German Confederation was dissolved, and Prussia emerged as the unchallenged power in northern Germany. But Bismarck's greatest act of political theater was still to come. He knew that to unite the southern German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden, he needed an external enemy. That enemy would be France. When a distant cousin of the Prussian king was offered the throne of Spain, France objected. Bismarck saw his opportunity. He edited a diplomatic telegram, the Ems Dispatch, to make it sound as if the Prussian king had insulted the French ambassador. Paris erupted in outrage. War was inevitable. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870 was short and devastating. Prussia's disciplined armies swept through France. Napoleon III was captured at Sedan, and within months Paris fell. Next, in 1866, he turned on his former ally, Austria. It was a bold and dangerous move, but Bismarck never played safe. The Austro-Prussian War lasted only 7 weeks. At the decisive Battle of Königgrätz, Prussia crushed the Austrian army. The old German Confederation was dissolved, and Prussia emerged as the unchallenged power in northern Germany. But Bismarck's greatest act of political theater was still to come. He knew that to unite the southern German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden, he needed an external enemy. That enemy would be France. When a distant cousin of the Prussian king was offered the throne of Spain, France objected. Bismarck saw his opportunity. He edited a diplomatic telegram, the Ems Dispatch, to make it sound as if the Prussian king had insulted the French ambassador. Paris erupted in outrage. War was inevitable. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870 was short and devastating. Prussia's disciplined armies swept through France. Napoleon III was captured at Sedan, and within months Paris fell. Then, in January 1871, in the glittering Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the very heart of defeated France, the German princes proclaimed King Wilhelm as Kaiser Wilhelm I, Emperor of Germany. Standing beside him was Bismarck, dressed in his white military uniform, calm and expressionless. He had done it. He had united Germany, not through revolution, but through strategy, manipulation, and war. The newly created German Empire was now the strongest power in Europe, and its true architect was not the Kaiser, but the Chancellor, the Iron Chancellor. Yet victory did not make Bismarck arrogant. It made him cautious. He feared that one careless move could destroy what he had built. For the next 2 decades, he turned his genius from war to peace. He crafted a complex web of alliances with Austria-Hungary, with Russia, and later with Italy to isolate France and maintain a fragile balance of power. This network of treaties became known as the Bismarckian system, Europe's tightrope of peace. At home, he introduced groundbreaking social reforms, health insurance, accident insurance, pensions, measures meant to keep workers loyal to the empire and to weaken the growing socialist movement. In a strange way, the conservative aristocrat had become the father of the modern welfare state, but he also had enemies. He waged the Kulturkampf, a culture struggle against the Catholic Church, trying to reduce its influence over politics and education. It failed. Bismarck learned that not even he could control faith. In 1888, Emperor Wilhelm I died. His successor, Wilhelm II, young, impulsive, and eager for glory, had little patience for the old chancellor's caution. In 1890, Bismarck was dismissed. As he left the palace for the last time, he reportedly said, "One day, the great European war will come out of some damned foolish thing in the Balkans." He was right 24 years later. That foolish thing, the assassination of an Austrian archduke, ignited World War I. Bismarck died in 1898, an old man watching Europe drift toward the disaster he had warned about. He had forged an empire through iron and blood, but without him, the balance he so carefully built could not hold. While Bismarck was forging a new empire through blood and calculation, another man sat upon a gilded throne in the very heart of Europe, a man who ruled not through ambition but through endurance. His name was Franz Joseph I, Emperor of Austria and later King of Hungary. For almost 7 decades, he ruled one of the most complex and fragile empires the world had ever known. Franz Joseph came to power in 1848, at the age of only 18. That year, revolution swept across Europe, cities burned, crowds demanded constitutions, parliaments, and national rights. The mighty Austrian Empire, once the symbol of old Europe, trembled on the brink of collapse. To save it, the ruling Habsburg dynasty turned to a young, disciplined soldier, Franz Joseph. He represented stability, loyalty, and faith in tradition. Under his reign, the revolution was crushed, order restored, and the empire survived. But the cost was high. The liberal dreams of 1848 were buried beneath the boots of imperial soldiers. Franz Joseph believed deeply in hierarchy and duty. He rose before dawn every morning, worked for hours at his desk, and expected perfection from everyone around him. He saw himself not as a man, but as the living embodiment of the empire, cold, steady, and unchanging. Yet the world around him was changing, rapidly. Nationalism spread like wildfire across Europe. The different peoples within his empire, Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Croats, Serbs, and Poles, began to demand their own nations, their own languages, their own flags. Franz Joseph refused to understand it. To him, the empire was eternal, a divine order that should never be questioned, but reality caught up. In 1859, Austria suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Napoleon III and the Italian nationalists. Lombardy was lost a few years later. In 1866, Bismarck's Prussia crushed Austria at the Battle of Königgrätz, stripping it of its influence over Germany. The Austrian Empire was no longer the great power it once had been. To prevent total collapse, Franz Joseph made a historic compromise. In 1867, he agreed to transform his realm into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, sharing power with the Hungarians while maintaining his control as emperor. It was a delicate balance, a political bandage over deep ethnic wounds. On the surface, the empire glittered. Vienna became a city of music, art, and culture, the home of Strauss, Mahler, and Klimt. But beneath the beauty, the structure was rotting. National tensions simmered in the Balkans, and the once mighty empire depended more on loyalty to Franz Joseph himself than to the idea of Austria-Hungary. And behind the emperor's stern face lay a man haunted by tragedy. His wife, Empress Elizabeth, known to history as Sisi, hated court life and longed for freedom. She became a restless wanderer, adored by her people, but deeply lonely. In 1889, their only son and heir, Crown Prince Rudolf, died in a murder-suicide pact at Mayerling. The scandal shattered the imperial family. 9 years later, Sisi herself was assassinated in Geneva by an anarchist. Still, Franz Joseph endured day after day, year after year. He continued his rigid routines, believing that duty must outlive pain. But the 20th century was approaching, and it would show no mercy to old empires. In June 1914, his heir, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated in Sarajevo. It was the spark that ignited World War I, the very war that Bismarck had predicted decades earlier. The empire marched into battle, loyal to its emperor and to its traditions, but utterly unprepared for the modern age of machines and mass destruction. Franz Joseph died in 1916, 2 years into the war. When his coffin was lowered into the crypt beneath Vienna, it wasn't just the end of a life, it was the end of an era. 2 years later, the Austro-Hungarian Empire ceased to exist. He had ruled for 68 years, longer than most of his subjects had lived. But in the end, all he had preserved was memory. In the end, these three men, Napoleon III, Bismarck, and Franz Joseph, tried to shape Europe in their own image. Each believed they could control destiny, that their power could hold back change. But history moves on, empires crumble, borders fade, and the ambitions of great men turn to dust. What remains are the lessons of pride, vision, and the price of power. The 19th century gave them their moment, and time took the rest.